Hello, and we're back with our guest, Paolo Zelati from Mantua, Italy, to talk about horror movies in general because this is our Halloween celebration. Hi, Paolo. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Sure. And there's a lot to talk about with Paulo. We do want to mention sort of the reason we chose to have him on is because of this book right up here, American Nightmares, which has just come out in English translation. It had been in Italian before,
Yeah.
but it's just come out here, and we'll have a link to that. There's some other exciting things that Paolo is up to, and we should probably start with that because he says this is the question he gets asked the most, and I wasn't aware of this up until he mentioned that. I didn't know that I had heard of this project, but I didn't know you were involved with it. It is Twilight of the Dead. What can you tell us about Twilight of the Dead?
Well, it's the last chapter of George Romero saga, and it's supposed to be connected. No, it is connected to Land of the Dead. So basically, that's the continuity, and is the way George wanted to end his saga, both narratively and conceptually. Like the whole idea behind this movie that has been developed during all these years are going to be ended in a wonderful way in this movie. So I wrote the treatment with George, the from my idea, and George actually understood that the saga wasn't over, and I just needed to give him that little small push in order to get into the mood of that. And he was really, really excited. We came up with all the story in 5 days. We were spending a holiday in Florida, and it came out like that. So basically, then we wrote the treatment, and George started to write the script. Um, and then all of a sudden, he got sick and he passed away in a couple of months.
Mm.
So after that, I was really heartbroken and everything because I was he was a good friend of mine, and really I grew up with these movies, and then we became friends, and so it was very hard. So I didn't even think to get to the movie, and but then I wanted to write a book about that. I wanted to that the fans all over the world, they needed to know how George wanted to end the most important influential saga of the modern horror cinema. So I did it, and I put the treatment, the subject of the movie in the middle, and I did explain what you want to do and everything. So I was supposed to get some little ashes about from all the people that work with them: Tom Savini, John Russo, all the team.
Mhm.
And so when I sent the book to Suzanne Romero, she said, "Look, I think we really should. This is great. George really wanted to do that. People are asking me for undone project by George, and I think we really should do that." So I said, "Okay, let's absolutely if you want to do that. But I really would love to be the one writing the script because I really know what you wanted." So I called two friends of mine from LA, John Eder, a great screenwriter, and Robert Lucas, and I went there and we wrote the script in all the screenplay, and it was like 2019. Then of course we work on that, and then the COVID was like
Mhm.
ruining the whole thing. And so right now, after all these years, we are very, very close, thank God, and crossing fingers. And we've been working, with producers, and right now, I really hope that is going to be something very, very good will be announced very soon. That's what I can tell you. You know.
Well, I'm pretty sure that is a people love Romero and the Dead series, not just the trilogy series. So it's very marketable there. So there's no doubt that people are going to be interested in it, and that's really pretty exciting. And you just did this because did you meet Romero because you were interviewing him for the American Nightmares book?
Exactly. We've been friends. Actually, I met him before when I was terminating my university thesis degree that I did on John Carpenter, and then it became my first book in Italian. And then I met George in Turin. It was 2001, right after the
9/11.
yeah, exactly, 9/11. So and I interviewed him from my thesis, asking him about his opinion about John Carpenter because I knew they were friends, and about the social the second degree of horror movies at their best. And then, of course, this friendship started to became became real during the whole process that brought me to write American Nightmare during 10 years. And George, of course, was one of the most important for me to get, because American Nightmares is not just about uh, talking about these guys and their careers and anecdotal stories. There is also that, but the main aim of the book is the you know the political and social issues that have been you know drove by these movies in that period. The new American horror, starting with Night of the Living Dead and ending the late 80s. So basically, it's all what happened in American society through those movies. So yeah, and I met George several times, and then I organized in Italy in 2017 a big celebration of George and his movies in Lucca Film Festival. So George and Suzanne, they came there. Michael Dougherty is editor, came too, and a lot of people came from all over Italy to pay homage to George. He was very moved. I think that was his last very pleasant journey. Like so after that, the we went to holiday together, and the idea came up like that, like talking about his movies actually.
Great. Hey, Giles, do you have any questions or should I just forge on?
Well, I guess I have maybe just a quick thing since you mentioned the book that we're going to be talking about, American Nightmares, which is a collection of somewhat 35
33.
interviews, 33,
30.
excuse me, 33 interviews you did with filmmakers, and you say that Romero's Dawn of the Dead is kind of the start of this new American Nightmare that you cover in these interviews. Uh,
Yes, Romero is basically the one, yes, that is really started the whole thing. Even if we can talk about something that came before, but
oh,
is really with Night of the Living Dead that the
yeah.
whole thing started.
Yeah, I guess it was just sort of occurred to me, maybe somewhat whimsically here. What would you say is perhaps like the effectively the final movie in this stretch of the American Nightmare before whatever the following age of horror cinema was? What would be like, your defining sort of bookend on the other side of this, if you have one?
So basically, the last one. Well, I can say something like, yeah, well, it's Brian Hughes now. It's like, let's call it The Dentist 2. So I'm talking about the dates you mentioned because you asked me a very specific question. So it's more about the period than a specific title, I
Oh,
guess. And it's early 90s because, of course, Society, if I'm not wrong, is 1990, 89, 90.
Yeah.
So that period, I think.
okay, so very well, it's a good 3 decades or so there. So yeah, that was just sort of wondering what that might be. So yeah, Greg, if you want to plow on, I'll chime in as
Well,
I've got
I guess just to follow up on that on the timing, there is at least one, and probably more directors that you interviewed who did their horror work actually a little before George Romero, and I'm thinking of one of our favorites, which is Jack Hill's Spider Baby.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
man.
so if Romero starts it, was I think, and I think that Spider Baby is such an interesting movie because it does have that classic like 30s, 40s Universal horror haunted house feel, but it also feels like it's very much looking forward into
Absolutely,
something
absolutely.
new. And I think it's aware of its own ridiculousness in a way that other movies weren't. So why did you want to include Spider Baby specifically in that
Yeah,
period?
exactly for what you said. I mean, that movie. I mean, I've been talking about this issue with Jack, of course. You know, you can say you can read it in the book, and with George that mentioned also Carnival of Souls. You know, but
Mhm.
then I said, look, George, I understand that, but those were part of a whole heritage. You know, at least a part, the structure of that. You know, so the real horror coming into now and then, into the American family, into the real life, the nowadays life, started with Night of the Living Dead. And part of this is happening also in Spider Baby, but according to Jack, at least, without any conscious pretense, thoughts behind that. Certainly, the structure is still, as you said, connected to the old classic horrors and the haunted house and stuff. But the real deal that really wanted me to connect the starting of new horror with that is the family, the family situation. um, this family that is no longer the yappy American family that used to be until now. And after 68, mostly in the 70s, with divorce, with abortion and everything else, everything changed. And Spider Baby really depicts a very weird and unusual kind of new American family. And also the sexuality is really, 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 came up
Mhm.
uh, like never before, I guess, before
Mhm.
Spider Baby. And then of course with those great actors, been friends with Sid Haig a lot because I've been doing a lot of convention with Italian masters, and I always ask Sid about that movie too. And yeah, it's a great movie, weird but great.
All right. And unless Giles has a question, I'll go ahead with another.
Yeah, I'll go for it, Greg. I'll chime in a little
All
bit.
right. Well, so I guess I'm kind of curious. So you're Italian. In America, there are a lot of people who are specifically interested in Italian horror. Um, so I'm wondering in Italy, how is American horror viewed? And did you write your book hoping to maybe change the way that Italians looked at American horror or help them understand things better?
No, no, no. I mean, of course, the whole idea of uh, making people understand what is behind horror movies is true in the United States, in Russia, and in Italy, because a lot of people doesn't look these movies the way they should. They underestimate that. So that's a general question. But in Italy, mostly in Europe, as Joe Dante underlines many times, your movies of that period has been discovered much, much, much earlier. I mean, the people like that. Let's talk about Alfred Hitchcock, that became an author thanks to the Cahiers du Cinéma. The French guys really discover even the film noir before even the term existed. And so Joe Dante, for example, was very happy for me to do that, and he was hoping 10 years ago that the book is going to be translated in English also, because um, I have a lot of friends I grew up with, movie critics like me and journalists that really grew up with American horror, and they do understand their value, but it's still a little part of the audience, but that's everywhere, you know. So yeah, the answer is I really hope that with this book, you know, I could help someone to change their mind, you know, about what horror movies are seeing, you know, just like in entertainment for kids, or, you know, butchery, or, you know, what they say about horror movies. In fact, if you think about that thing that people describing, has been describing for years, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as one of my favorite movies, as the most violent and bloody, because they have never seen it. Because there is just no more than a couple of drops of blood in the whole fucking movie. I mean, they haven't seen it. So, you know what I mean? You guys, I mean, before talking about stuff, you should know about that. And also because fantastic cinema and literature also always been the right vehicle to talk about these issues, the social and, you know, the fears, anxieties, and desires of entire generation went through the fantastic fiction. So let's talk about Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or The War of the Worlds. It's all being done, 1984, of course. It's all being done to talk about the present using a disguise of the fantastic future or alterated present. So that's what I love about horror.
Absolutely. It is interesting that you consider this like 1968 to about 1990 to be a classic period. I do think that horror kind of after 1990 in America kind of gets into a slump. Too many slasher remakes and things like that. I do think now is a really interesting period. It's kind of emerged with people like Jordan Peele and Robert Eggers and Ari Aster. How do you feel about what's going on right now?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, you're right. I've just read a wonderful book that came out in Italian, written by a friend of mine, Pier Maria Bocchi, that is analyzing the horror through the decades, and he calls the 90s as a, you know, he said in the 90s we have the transparent horror. That is something that it almost didn't happen without any, you know what I mean? It's basically what you said. So after that, you know, there is, first of all, horror is cyclical. And so that's a fact that nobody can change. And I had the feeling in the last 10 years that the cycle was a little bit, you know, steady. I can understand some of these new movies, but I hate just the idea of this, you know, elevated horror thing. I just can't take it. For example, you know, because growing up with these movies, I know what you need to make political movies, and it's not what Ari Aster does. I hate the guy. I mean, I really hate those movies so much. I can't take them. I can understand something else better. I understand what they want to do, but even a movie like Us, come on, it's in your face. I mean, it's just like those people never saw the masters who did that, how they did that. It's just like a movie made by Thesis, but they are forgetting the movie needs to be entertained as a first thing. It's like Joker 2. I mean, I understand what, you know, they wanted to do, and the idea is more brave, more, you know, interesting, more genius than the first movie. But the idea is one thing. Thesis is one thing. The whole thing about, you know, the this contrast on the industry, everything that you can see in that movie is really great. But once it gets on the film, it doesn't work, and it's just fucking boring. Boring. Even the use of the musical, I get it. You know, it's a great idea of using that language to express their psychosis. but it doesn't work.
Mm.
It's boring. It's boring. And that's the worst thing you can do with all these people that I interview, the ones that agree about, horror being political. Some of them don't. For example, you had to try to speak with Dick Donner about that. It would just, laugh on your face. Richard Donner was a great guy, very intelligent and smart, but he absolutely didn't think that horror needed to have a message, for example. But all these people, they know, how you have to do this. You don't have to hammer people on their head. You have the value of entertainment comes first, as Herschel Gordon Lewis used to say. I do like some of these new movie, and I understand that they are actually, even if I like it or not, they are interpreting our time, the whole woke thing, women empowerment. But stuff like Barbarian or The Man is just something I just can't stand, man. I can't stand it. I can listen to people explaining that to me, and I can agree with them, but still I don't like them.
I wonder if part of the difference may be where it's coming from because, these movies now are being backed by relatively big studios and have some art house credibility, whereas the period you're talking about in the, 70s, horror movies were kind of considered trash by the mainstream people, and people who worked in them were working, a lot of times to put them into drive-ins and grindhouses rather than the big movie palaces. And so they were a little more, horror movies were a little closer to the underground back during that period, and a little more punk maybe than they are today.
I see your point, but what you said is it's even worse thinking from that point of view, because that means that today to do a good horror movie, you have to be arty, you have to be something, you have to be experimental or not understandable from the major of the people. Is not. It's wrong. It's wrong. I do, but this is my personal opinion. Movies like Hereditary or the other things he did, I don't even remember the name. Those titles are, they try to do something with the cinephile spirit, but on the other hand, they want to be super auteur. And they don't. And Ari Aster, for example, I don't know if he realized that he's getting comical, but I don't know if it's something that he wants to do or it comes naturally. But I really don't get it. And if the reason is the one you said, well, okay, so now we have to accept that to go on the big screen. I mean, I understand right now is the worst moment in history for cinema, and mostly for the theatrical, and let me tell you, I know that. But movies like Terrifier 3 is a simple idea. It's something that people wanted to enjoy and laugh about that, It made $18 million, man. So maybe people want to have fun. It doesn't mean that doing something with a second level of reading doesn't have to be fun. And you have to make a lecture or hit me on the head with your hammer and be boring and just metaphorical. I love metaphors, but these movies, come on.
They should, maybe the metaphor should come more naturally rather than being.
It's just, yeah.
Because I mean, so like something like Return of the or Night of the Living Dead, it's a very simple, entertaining story, right? And it's going to address current issues kind of by accident, almost. I mean,
absolutely. And George always been very honest about that. He was against some overthought interpretations. Some of those things came into those movies because that was the period, and stuff of the period come into your movies, you want or you don't want. It's a fact. And but stuff like using Ben, Dwayne Jones, black actor as a main character, wasn't a conscious decision. It just was the best of his friends to play that role. And George always told me that I regret now that because I couldn't use that thing more if I was aware of what I was doing with that. But then we get to the end where you can see the posse coming and killing him and dragging him away, and you really can see the Ku Klux Klan there and what was going on for real. So that's not a metaphor at all. That's in your face, but doing properly. I don't know if you guys agree with me.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's, also in a similar way, that movie was made during Vietnam, right? So you see all the
Sure.
carnage, but it's not about Vietnam. It's not a direct metaphor for Vietnam, but people watching it will probably think.
Well, talking about Vietnam, the masterpiece is a Bob Clark Death Dream.
Mhm.
That's really a masterpiece. Is a drama disguised as a horror movie that it tells you guys what really was Vietnam in and back in America. So that movie and Apocalypse Now for me are the two greatest movies ever made about Vietnam War. One on the spot, the other one in the United States. So the other thing, but that's a technical thing that really was bringing the feeling of that pain that a lot of parents were, experiencing, and is using the camera, the trembling camera, hand camera to shoot the movie, like Last House on the Left, and that style just came into the American conscience thanks to the news coming from Vietnam. Before that, never happened. And horror movies of that period use that style to shoot like horrible and painful stories. So that's the comparison that really connects Vietnam to those movies at its best, I guess. Not everybody, for example, if you think about John Carpenter, he always had a very classical style. Halloween is a fantastic puzzle of incredible cinematic magic, but all structure from different point of view. So it's not something that every person had their own style. But if you think about Last House on the Left or even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you understand what I'm talking about.
Right. Giles, any questions?
Yeah, getting to your book of interviews there, I was familiar with some of the names and then did a quick look on IMDb for all the ones I was unfamiliar. There are a bunch that are directors, a number of screenwriters, some are both. I was wondering if they provided different, I don't know, either takes or opinions on horror, from the screenwriter camp versus the director camp, or if it was, overall
No,
just
no.
parallel.
Basically, it's the same thing. Basically, it's the same. Also, because let's just, for example, the most important one is the godfather of all of us is Richard Matheson. Richard Matheson is the godfather of the fantastic modern cinema and literature. Thanks to I Am a Legend, and not only that, thanks to everything he wrote. And that was the most exciting thing for me to do, to spend one full day with Richard Matheson, talking about even, political meaning, or, it's just, but of course, Richard was part of the old generation. So he would just hate everything that was like splatter or something that, he liked terror over horror, or great directors, the king of independent like John Sayles. We were talking about these horror scripts, and mostly Piranha and The Howling. So he was one of the most, most keen to admit that what he was doing, writing that, was exactly what you can see on the screen, you know. So yeah, no, I can't say there is a difference. Probably only Richard Matheson, but Matheson is something apart. Is the god of all of us.
So let me, we don't have all that much more time, but so I did want to get into a couple of other things. Maybe for example, when people visit your website, the first thing, the paolozelati.com, first thing that comes up is movie posters.
Is .it.
.it, sorry. It'll be in the link correctly.
Yeah.
paolozelati.it. But first thing that comes up is movie posters. And so is that as much of a passion as writing about movies, more, or
Well, it's part of that. It's really part of that. It's part of my work as well. I own the largest Italian movie poster collection known, and mostly, you wouldn't believe me, but the main thing of my collection is American film noir through the Italian posters. Casablanca is right here, for example. Gilda is there, and but another news I can tell you about that is I'm going to publish with the same publisher of American Nightmares a series of books that I've been working on for 12 years. It's a history of exploitation cinema through Italian posters. So it's basically from 1960 up to, it's 30 years. The 30 years, 60s, 70s, and 80s, 30 years of the golden age of genre cinema, exploitation cinema. So every single genre will have his book or books. Sexploitation. We're gonna start with Italian horror and Gothic, and you will see everything from Black Sunday up to the last full cheese movie of the late 80s.
Good stuff. Jazz, do you have a question, or?
Yeah, it actually ties in with your movie poster collection and your love of the static visual representation of the film there. The cover of your book, I imagine the art for that must have been something you wanted a very specific kind of thing for. I wonder if you might just talk very briefly about the artist, about that, and how that came to be.
I love that, because I love to speak about that, because this is a painting, original painting, made by the very good friend of mine, is very talented, famous Italian painter, Vittorio Mustafa, that create this painting just for me. We chat a little bit about what I wanted, the concept, the people, the boogeymans that I really wanted to see, and it's Michael and Leatherface, first of all, and in the back you can interpret that as a zombies, the Romero zombies, or all the other dark shadows of the American horror, basically. And I love this one. I hope I might do other languages for American Nightmares. I've been having some requests, and I really hope I can use this painting for all the versions of American Nightmares.
All right. Well, just get the permission from your artist friend.
Oh, I have.
Let's see. Completely divorced from your work, I just have a question because I'm curious. This is our celebratory Halloween episode, and I'm wondering, how big a deal is Halloween in Italy? Do they celebrate it like they do here in America?
No. It became a little bit bigger during the last, let's say, 10, 15 years. They do trick or treat, even if it's not like a huge phenomenon, not in every city. But they do that. They do Halloween parties. But it's really, I would say, 30% or even less than the American celebration, unfortunately.
Do you personally consider it it's a horror milestone here? Everybody, even people who don't usually pay attention to horror, will pay attention to horror movies at this time of year here. So it's kind of nice that for that reason.
Absolutely. I mean, personally, I always like to carve a pumpkin. Every year I do once, do a different face, and I put it in front of my window. And for more than 15 years in row, I've always watched Halloween that day, no matter what.
Excellent.
The first one of the day.
Giles, do you want to get in the final question?
Yeah, so we had a good chat about horror writers. Your book, American Nightmares, is out now in English. You told us your hometown is Mantua, Italy. Can you recommend a restaurant there?
Yes, it's called Grifone Bianco. Is the white griffon, and it's one of the main square here close to my house. Is a Piazza Erbe, and is my favorite restaurant in town.
Well,
Excellent. So next time you find yourself, listeners, in Mantua, you've got a place to go.
Absolutely. If anytime you want me here, guys, you just drop me an email. I would be happy to talk with you about weird movies.
Oh, good. And if we go to Mantua, maybe we'll have a place to sleep.
Absolutely. Well, yeah.
You got 30 seconds. Is there any upcoming project you want to plug really quickly?
Well, these poster books are really the biggest. And of course, second only to the Twilight of the Dead. We hope to be very, very close to start the production.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on,
great.
Paolo Zelati.
Hopefully
we'll talk to you
guys.
again. Goodbye, everybody. We'll be back next week. And that should be it.
I like